It was an ordinary day at the Starlight Grand Hotel, a place where the rich and famous often stayed. The gold chandeliers shimmered overhead, and the polished floors gleamed. The air smelled of expensive perfume, and everything seemed perfect. Staff in sharp uniforms moved quickly, always with a smile, always ready to serve. But that day, something different happened. A man walked through the grand glass doors. He was tall, with a calm and quiet presence. His clothes were simple, old jeans and a worn-out jacket. His shoes, once black, were now faded and scuffed. His hair was neatly combed, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen much in life. But nothing about him screamed rich or important. The luxury hotel staff barely looked up when he entered. A few whispered quietly among themselves, shaking their heads. In the corner, two workers giggled as they watched him approach the front desk. "He's probably lost," one worker muttered, glancing at his shoes. "No one like that belongs here." The other worker smiled as he made a small joke. "Maybe he's looking for the janitor's closet. We don't need any cleaners right now." They both chuckled, the sound of their laughter mixing with the soft hum of the hotel's classical music. The man reached the desk, where the receptionist, Lali, was standing. She was a young woman, fresh out of college, eager to impress her managers. Her smile was bright as she asked, "How may I help you, sir?" The man looked at her quietly, his eyes calm but piercing. "I'm looking for a room," he said softly, his voice calm and steady. Lily blinked, unsure. She glanced down at his shoes. The worn-out leather was cracked in places, and the soles were nearly gone. His clothes, though clean, looked like they had been through years of use. For a moment, Lily felt uncomfortable. She hesitated, not sure if he could afford one of their luxurious rooms. Before she could say anything, a voice interrupted from behind her. "Well, we don't really need cleaners right now, sir," the man behind her said with a slight sneer. He was the head bellboy, wearing a shiny uniform that looked too tight for his broad shoulders. He stepped forward and handed the man a mop. "If you're looking for work, we can always use some help in the back." Lily's eyes widened, and she quickly looked at the man. But the stranger didn't react. He didn't raise his voice or glare back. He didn't shout at the bellboy or call him out. Instead, he looked at the mop in his hands and nodded. "Thank you," he said softly, his tone polite and calm. Lily watched as the man turned and walked away without a word of anger. He moved toward the hotel's exit, his steps slow but steady, as if the laughter and mockery didn't touch him at all. Lily stood frozen at the desk, her face turning red. She felt a wave of embarrassment for what had just happened. She could see her colleagues laughing again, their heads turned to whisper, but the man was already gone. Outside, the man walked through the glass doors and onto the street. His steps were calm, and he didn't rush. The luxury cars lined up in front of the hotel didn't seem to matter to him. He didn't look at the expensive sports cars, nor did he glance at the bright lights of the hotel sign. He simply walked down the sidewalk, disappearing into the crowd of people. Back inside the hotel, Lily turned to the bellboy with a mix of surprise and disappointment. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice low. "You didn't have to treat him like that." The bellboy shrugged, his smirk still on his face. "I just saw him walking in here looking like he didn't belong. Can you imagine? A man like that in a place like this? It's almost laughable." Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She'd seen people come in with far less money than most of the hotel's regular guests, but they were treated with kindness, with respect. This man, the man with the old shoes, had been treated as though he were invisible, like he didn't deserve to be in a place like this. Hours later, the hotel was quiet. The staff went about their usual duties, but Lily couldn't get the man out of her mind. Something about his calmness stayed with her. She had expected him to be angry, to shout, to demand something. But instead, he had simply walked away. Lily sat down in the back office, trying to focus on her paperwork, but all she could think about was the man who had been treated like he didn't belong. Someone who, even without words, had shown more dignity than anyone in the room. The next day, the luxury hotel buzzed with excitement. The staff was still gossiping about the man in the old shoes, but there was something more now, an undercurrent of tension. People were curious. Had they made a mistake? Had they treated the man unfairly? Then, suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Lily opened it, and to her surprise, it was the same man, standing in front of her. This time, he was dressed in a sharp, expensive suit. He stood tall, his posture confident, and his eyes had a quiet power in them. The bellboy, who had mocked him the day before, froze in place. His mouth went dry. Lily's heart skipped a beat as she looked up at the man. He smiled softly. "Is Mr. Thompson available?" he asked, his voice warm yet firm. Lily nodded, unsure of what to say. "Of course, sir." The days following Jordan King's unexpected visit to the Starlight Grand Hotel were filled with whispers, gossip, and a lingering sense of discomfort. For the staff who had mocked him, there was no escaping the feeling that they had underestimated him, a mistake that felt far more serious now that they knew who he really was. Lily spent much of her time at the reception desk, trying to focus on the tasks at hand, but her mind kept wandering back to the events that had unfolded. How could she have been so blind? And how could she have let her colleagues treat him so unfairly? Every day, she found herself more and more disturbed by what had happened. The luxury hotel was meant to be a place of respect, but the staff had let their assumptions cloud their judgment. They had treated a man as though he was less than they were simply because of his appearance. Lily couldn't help but wonder if they had done the same with other guests, silently judging them before ever getting to know them. But it was one particular evening that made Lily realize just how far-reaching their mistake had been. It was a rainy evening, and the hotel lobby was quiet. A few guests sat in the plush chairs, their faces buried in newspapers or tapping away at their phones. The staff moved about, doing their usual routines. But today, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She watched as a well-dressed couple entered, their arms linked, walking with the air of people used to luxury. The man at the front desk greeted them politely, checking them in, while Lily continued to organize the guest files. But she couldn't help but notice something strange: the way the couple glanced around as they walked through the lobby. They looked at the bellboy in his uniform, then at Lily, then at the empty desk where the manager's nameplate usually rested. "Do you think the owner will be around tonight?" the man of the couple asked. The woman beside him whispered, "I heard there was a change in management." The bellboy, who overheard them, nodded, his face twitching slightly. He seemed uneasy as he answered, "The owner? I'm not sure, but I haven't seen him around much lately. Maybe he's just busy." Lily didn't know what to make of it, but as the couple moved to the elevators, something else caught her attention. She saw Jordan King, the same man in the old shoes and now in a sharp suit, standing across the lobby, talking to a few of the staff. This time, though, there was something different about his presence. It wasn't the quiet calmness he had shown before. Now there was something in his eyes, an undeniable power. His gaze wasn't cold, but it was confident, almost as if he was looking right through the staff who had mocked him. Lily watched as Jordan finished his conversation, nodded once, and turned to walk toward the elevators. Minutes later, Lily overheard a conversation between two hotel staff members. One of them was the same bellboy who had handed Jordan the mock that day. "I heard it straight from the manager," the bellboy whispered to the other worker. "The new owner is not here to play games. He's already planning major changes." Lily felt her stomach tighten as she eavesdropped. "What kind of changes?" The bellboy shrugged, his face pale. "He's here to take control, and he's not going to put up with anything." Lily couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Jordan had been silent, calm, and polite, but now it seemed he was preparing to change everything. Back in the manager's office, Jordan King sat at the desk, reviewing several papers with a focused expression. He wasn't just an ordinary businessman. His presence, the quiet way he carried himself, told Lily that he had power far beyond the walls of this hotel. The phone rang, and Jordan picked it up without hesitation. His voice was calm, but there was an authority behind it that commanded attention. "Mr. Thompson, I need you to organize a staff meeting tomorrow morning," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'll be addressing the changes I want to see in this hotel. It's time to raise the standards, not just for our guests, but for our staff as well." Lily couldn't help but listen in, her eyes wide with curiosity. The next day, the staff gathered in the conference room. The air was thick with nervous energy as they waited for Jordan to speak. They had all heard the rumors, whispers of how he was planning to make some big changes. Some of the workers were eager, hoping for a fresh start. Others, especially those who had treated him poorly, felt uneasy about facing him. When Jordan entered the room, everything went silent. He stood tall at the front, his eyes scanning the room. He didn't say a word at first. He just stood there, observing. Finally, he spoke. "Good morning, everyone. As you know, I'm Jordan King, and I've taken ownership of this hotel." He paused, his gaze intense. "And there are a few things that need to change around here." The staff sat up straighter, some exchanging nervous glances. Jordan continued, his voice steady. "I've spent years building businesses, and I've learned one important lesson. People are the backbone of any organization, but if you don't treat your guests with respect, you won't succeed. It's as simple as that." He then glanced toward the back of the room, where the bellboy, the one who had mocked him the day before, stood frozen in place. "You all have one job here," Jordan said, his tone firm. "That job is to respect every guest who walks through those doors, no matter who they are, what they wear, or how much money they have. There will be no exceptions. If I catch any of you treating people like they don't belong here, there will be consequences." The bellboy's face turned bright red. He looked around, feeling the weight of Jordan's words. For a brief moment, the room was silent, and then Jordan spoke again. "I've worked hard for everything I have, and I won't tolerate anything less than excellence from all of you. If you're willing to treat everyone with the respect they deserve, this place can become something truly special. If not," he let the sentence trail off, but his meaning was clear. Jordan's words echoed in the room long after he had finished speaking. He didn't need to shout or raise his voice. He didn't need to demand respect. His presence alone commanded it. Lily couldn't help but feel a surge of respect for him. He wasn't just the owner of the hotel. He was someone who had built his empire with integrity, and now he was teaching the staff a valuable lesson, one that would change the way they saw themselves and their guests forever. The next morning, the Starlight Grand Hotel buzzed with a new energy. The staff had been on edge since Jordan King's stern meeting, unsure of what changes might come, but also a little relieved. They had been given a second chance, a warning, and a set of clear expectations. Some were still resentful, but others were eager to show that they could rise to the occasion. Lily had spent most of the night thinking about the meeting. Jordan King wasn't just a businessman. He was someone who understood people, who knew that real change didn't come through force, but through respect and hard work. The way he had carried himself, calm and confident, yet with a sense of quiet authority, had left a lasting impression on her. And she knew he had left a mark on the others as well. Later that day, the hotel's lounge was filled with guests, many of them sipping cocktails and relaxing by the grand piano. Lily was busy behind the counter when she overheard a conversation between two guests who had just checked in. One of them was a woman dressed in a designer dress, her hair pulled back in a sophisticated bun. The other was a man in a well-tailored suit, his briefcase by his side. "I hear the new owner is really shaking things up here," the woman said with a slight smirk. "They say he's got a big agenda." The man nodded, but his eyes were glued to the reception desk, where Lily was standing. "He's definitely a different kind of guy. I heard he's got a lot of influence in the business world," he said, glancing around the room. "It'll be interesting to see how he runs this place." Lily's ears perked up. Jordan King was already making waves in the business world. The guests were starting to take notice. They were curious about him, intrigued by the mystery surrounding his rise to power. But it wasn't just about his success. It was about the quiet power he carried, the kind of power that didn't need to be announced with fanfare. He didn't need anyone to tell him how important he was. He simply was. As the day went on, Lily continued to observe the hotel's transformation. The staff, though still adjusting, had started to take more pride in their work. The bellboy who had mocked Jordan was now carefully placing luggage into a guest's car with a smile. The housekeeper who had scoffed at the idea of cleaning after such a distinguished guest was now meticulously making beds with a level of precision that surprised even herself. But the most noticeable change came in the way the guests were treated. Every guest, from the wealthy business people to the quiet families, was greeted with the same respect and courtesy. No one was above anyone else. No one was judged by the clothes they wore or the car they arrived in. They were all treated like royalty. Jordan's silent revolution was underway, and it was changing the hotel's atmosphere from the inside out. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, Jordan King walked through the hotel lobby. His presence was unmistakable, though he wasn't drawing attention. People sensed something about him, something that made them look up, just for a moment, before going back to their tasks. They knew there was more to him than they realized. Jordan wasn't here to make friends. He wasn't here to be liked. He was here to build something that would last, a legacy. And he knew that to do that, he needed to start with respect. He walked past Lily, who was still behind the counter, her mind racing with thoughts of the last few days. He paused for a brief moment, and she looked up, meeting his gaze. "Good evening, miss. I trust everything is going well." His voice was smooth, but his eyes were sharp, as though he could see right through her. Lily nodded, feeling a bit self-conscious. "Yes, sir. Everything is going smoothly." Jordan's eyes lingered for a moment longer than necessary, and Lily suddenly felt that he wasn't just asking out of politeness. He was testing her, silently observing her reaction, and for the first time, she realized that the respect he demanded wasn't just for the guests. It extended to everyone in the hotel, including the staff. "You're doing good work, Lily," he said, his tone casual, but the words hit her like a wave. "Keep it up." Lily's heart skipped a beat. He had noticed her, not just as a member of the staff, but as a person. That small acknowledgement meant more than she could express. Later that evening, as the hotel quieted down, Maya, who had been trying to avoid the tension of the past few days, found herself sitting alone in the staff lounge. She was still processing the changes, unsure of how she felt about everything. But she knew one thing for certain: Jordan King was making an impact. She had seen how the staff had reacted to him, how they changed. The bellboy had even apologized to her, admitting that he had been wrong to judge the man the way he had. It was a small step, but it was something. Maya stared out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance. It was hard to believe that just a few days ago, she had seen Jordan as nothing more than a lowly guest. Now he was someone who was forcing everyone to confront their biases, to think differently. She smiled to herself. Maybe this was what the hotel needed. Not just a new owner, but a new perspective. As the evening turned to night, Jordan returned to his office, alone with his thoughts. He had a long road ahead of him. The changes he was bringing wouldn't happen overnight, and there would be resistance. But he had already seen progress, and he knew it was just the beginning. He looked at the desk in front of him, his fingers gently tracing the edge of the wood. He wasn't here for fame. He wasn't here for luxury. He was here to change the way people thought about success, about respect, and about the way they treated others. Lily watched from behind the counter as Jordan entered his office, the door closing softly behind him. For the first time since he had walked into the hotel, she felt like she understood him. This wasn't just about the hotel. This was about something bigger, a message, a silent revolution that would ripple through the entire city. And it was just getting started. As the days passed, the transformation at the Starlight Grand Hotel became undeniable. Staff members who had once scoffed at the idea of treating every guest equally now approached their jobs with renewed dedication. Guests, too, began to notice the difference. The atmosphere had shifted. It was no longer a place where status determined treatment. It had become a place where respect was the currency everyone exchanged. But not everyone was happy with these changes. The first sign of trouble came when Kyle Andrews, the hotel's head chef, overheard two of his colleagues talking in the break room. "They're really changing everything around here, huh?" one of them said, shaking his head. "I'm not sure I like it." Kyle didn't say anything, but he couldn't help overhearing. He had been with the hotel for nearly 5 years, and in all that time, he had seen owners come and go. But none of them had ever pushed for change the way Jordan King had. The man was different. He didn't just want to run the hotel. He wanted to turn it into something special. But the real question was everyone on board? Later that evening, Jordan had scheduled a dinner meeting with several high-profile investors who were interested in taking part in the hotel's future development. The atmosphere in the restaurant was one of quiet tension. Lily had been tasked with overseeing the evening service, and she couldn't help but feel the weight of it on her shoulders. This dinner was a big deal, and Jordan's reputation hung in the balance. As the guests entered the private dining area, Lily noticed a familiar face at the table. Mark Dempsey, the same man who had treated Jordan like a nobody on his first visit, the same man who had laughed at him and given him a mop. Jordan hadn't said anything about the past encounter, but Lily knew that he remembered. He always remembered. The evening was progressing smoothly. The guests were enjoying the food, and the conversation flowed naturally. But as the night wore on, things started to shift. Mark Dempsey, sitting at the head of the table, began to grow increasingly impatient. He was no longer paying attention to the meal, and his gaze frequently flickered toward Jordan, who remained calm, unfazed. Finally, Mark couldn't hold it in anymore. He leaned forward, his voice loud enough for the others to hear. "So, Mr. King," he began, his tone dripping with sarcasm, "I have to admit, I'm impressed. I didn't think a man like you would be capable of turning this place around. It's a real achievement." Jordan, who had been quietly listening, didn't respond right away. His calm demeanor never wavered. "Tell me," Mark continued, his eyes narrowing, "how exactly did you do it? What's the secret? Because I've been in this business for years, and I've never seen anyone change things this quickly." Lily watched the interaction from the side of the room, her pulse quickening. She could sense the tension building. Jordan looked at Mark, his expression neutral. "It's simple," he said quietly, but his voice held a quiet strength. "Respect." Mark's face twisted into a smile, but it wasn't friendly. "Respect?" he scoffed. "That's your secret. I thought it would be something more impressive." The other guests at the table shifted uncomfortably, sensing the growing animosity between the two men. But Jordan didn't flinch. He simply gave Mark a small knowing smile. "Respect is everything," Jordan said, his voice low but firm. "If you don't treat people with respect, no matter who they are, you lose. It's that simple." The room fell silent. Mark looked like he was about to retort, but he paused. Something in Jordan's words seemed to hit him hard, though he wasn't willing to admit it. For the next few minutes, the conversation drifted back to business, but Lily could feel the shift in the room. The balance had tipped. It was clear that Jordan had won the first round. That night, after the dinner had ended, Jordan returned to his office, his mind already shifting toward the future. The dinner had gone well. The investors had been impressed, though they had been skeptical at first. Jordan knew that the next steps were critical. But there was one person he couldn't stop thinking about: Mark Dempsey. As he sat behind his desk, reviewing documents, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He picked up without hesitation. "Mr. King," a voice on the other end said. "This is Ellen Carter from Starlight Investments. I'm calling on behalf of Mark Dempsey. He's requested a meeting with you." Jordan raised an eyebrow. Mark Dempsey wanted to meet with him, after everything that had happened? "I'm listening," Jordan replied, his voice calm, but curious. Ellen hesitated before continuing. "Mark feels there are some things he needs to say. He wants to apologize for the way he treated you. He's hoping to discuss how he can be a part of the hotel's future moving forward." Jordan leaned back in his chair, considering the offer. This was unexpected. He had thought Mark would be one of the last people to come to him for forgiveness. "Tell Mark I'll meet with him," Jordan said finally, his voice steady. "But there's one thing I need him to understand. Apology or not, actions speak louder than words." The following day, Mark Dempsey arrived at Jordan's office, his usual arrogance replaced with an air of tension. He was still wearing his expensive suit, but there was something different about him now. He wasn't the man who had dismissed Jordan so easily before. As he sat across from Jordan, he cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology," he began, his voice much quieter than usual. "The way I treated you, it was wrong. I judged you based on your appearance, and that was a mistake. I've come to realize that." Jordan studied him for a moment, watching his every move. The arrogance in Mark's eyes had faded, replaced by something much rarer: vulnerability. "Apologies are a start," Jordan said, his voice calm. "But if you want to be part of this hotel's future, you'll need to prove that you've learned something. It's not about words. It's about showing respect in your actions. Every day." Mark nodded slowly. "I understand. I want to be a part of this change. I want to be part of something that matters." As the meeting concluded, Jordan stood up, extending his hand to Mark. The gesture was simple, but it carried a message of its own. Actions spoke louder than words, and this was only the beginning of the changes that were to come. Mark had made his first move. Now, it was time to see if he could live up to his promise. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity at the Starlight Grand Hotel. The changes Jordan had set in motion were becoming more evident with each passing day. But despite the progress, there were still whispers among the staff, and not everyone was fully on board with the new direction. Some staff members were skeptical, unsure of how far this new respect philosophy could go. Others, however, were already embracing the changes, working harder and taking pride in their jobs. But Jordan knew that true change didn't happen overnight. It was going to take time, and he had to stay focused on his mission. It wasn't long before a major test came, one that would truly reveal the heart of the hotel's new direction. A VIP guest had arrived at the hotel, Mr. William Waverly, a wealthy businessman known for his demanding attitude and high expectations. He was the kind of guest who had always expected the best, but who also made life difficult for the staff. Rumor had it that he had caused problems in every luxury hotel he had stayed in, always finding something to complain about, and always making sure to let everyone know just how important he was. When the front desk received his reservation, the staff exchanged nervous glances. They all knew that Mr. Waverly's arrival was a moment of truth for them. It was one thing to treat average guests with respect, but what about someone like Mr. Waverly? Would they be able to maintain their composure and treat him with the same level of dignity, no matter how he treated them? Lily, now fully entrenched in her role, was assigned to greet Mr. Waverly upon his arrival. She took a deep breath as she watched him step out of his sleek, black limousine. He was a tall, imposing man in a sharp suit, his face already twisted into a frown. As he approached the entrance, the staff straightened up, each of them silently preparing for what was to come. Mr. Waverly entered the hotel, his eyes immediately scanning the surroundings. Lily greeted him with a warm smile and a polite bow of her head. "Good afternoon, Mr. Waverly," she said, her voice steady. "Welcome to the Starlight Grand Hotel. We're so happy to have you with us." His eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance. Lily, dressed in her smart uniform, was an image of poise and professionalism, but that didn't seem to impress him. He raised an eyebrow and let out an audible sigh. "I hope this place is as good as they say," he muttered, not even bothering to return her greeting. "I'm expecting the very best. I don't tolerate mediocrity." Lily's smile never wavered. She nodded respectfully. "Of course, Mr. Waverly. We will ensure you have the finest experience. Please allow me to escort you to your suite." As they walked through the lobby, Mr. Waverly continued to grumble about small things. The temperature of the room was too cold, the lighting was too dim, and the artwork on the walls didn't meet his standards. Each complaint came like a jab, but Lily held her ground, responding politely to each one, offering solutions and reassuring him. By the time they reached his suite, Mr. Waverly seemed somewhat satisfied, but his expression remained cold. Lily handed him the key card with a smile. "I trust everything is to your liking, Mr. Waverly," she said, not letting her exhaustion show. "If you need anything at all during your stay, please don't hesitate to reach out to us." His gaze was icy as he glanced at her. "We'll see about that," he replied, before disappearing into the room, the door closing behind him with a sharp click. That evening, Jordan sat at his desk, reviewing the reports from the day. Mark Dempsey had made some progress, and the staff were continuing to improve. However, Jordan had a feeling that something important was about to happen. The hotel was on the verge of a defining moment, and it was coming in the form of Mr. Waverly. Later that night, as Jordan was walking through the lobby, he noticed a commotion at the front desk. Lily, along with a few other staff members, was standing nervously around the counter. Jordan approached, his curiosity piqued. Lily turned to him, her face pale. "Mr. Waverley has made a complaint," she said, her voice tense. "He insists that the suite he was given isn't good enough and wants an immediate upgrade. He's threatening to leave if we don't meet his demands." Jordan took a moment to assess the situation. This was it. This was the test he had been waiting for. Would his staff continue to uphold the principles of respect, even when dealing with someone like Mr. Waverley, who clearly had no respect for them? Jordan took a deep breath and then addressed Lily with calm authority. "Please have him brought to my office. I'll speak with him personally." Lily looked up at him, a mix of relief and apprehension on her face. "Of course, Mr. King." A few minutes later, Mr. Waverley entered Jordan's office, his demeanor just as cold as before. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the luxurious furnishings and the polished wood, but there was no sign of satisfaction in his eyes. "You," he said, pointing to Jordan, "are the one who runs this place. I've been made to feel uncomfortable by the lack of attention to detail in my suite. It's unacceptable." Jordan stood up from his desk, walking slowly towards Mr. Waverley. His gaze never faltered, his posture relaxed but confident. "I'm sorry you feel that way," Jordan said, his voice steady. "But I assure you, the staff here have been doing their best to provide the best experience possible. I understand that your expectations are high, and we will certainly try to meet them. But there is one thing you should understand, Mr. Waverley. This hotel is about respect. Respect for our guests, and respect for our staff." Mr. Waverley scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "Respect? What does that have to do with anything? I'm paying for a service. I expect the best. I don't care about respect." Jordan's eyes darkened, but his voice remained calm. "If you're here only for luxury, then I apologize. But this hotel doesn't operate on luxury alone. We operate on respect. It's the foundation of everything we do here. And if you can't respect that, then I'm afraid you'll need to make other arrangements." For a moment, there was silence. Mr. Waverley was stunned. He hadn't expected this response. He had come here thinking he could bully his way into getting what he wanted, but Jordan wasn't having it. As the days went by, the Starlight Grand Hotel continued to flourish, but the challenges didn't end. With the recent test of Mr. Waverley behind them, Jordan knew that the changes he had set in motion were far from complete. His mission wasn't just about improving the hotel. It was about changing the entire mindset of everyone who walked through its doors. And that wouldn't happen overnight. Mark Dempsey, who had struggled to find his place in the new system, had slowly started to embrace the idea of treating everyone with equal respect, regardless of their wealth or status. But there were still moments when his old habits crept back in. One afternoon, Mark and Jordan were sitting together in the hotel's lounge, reviewing upcoming events when Mark let out a frustrated sigh. "This whole respect for everyone thing is harder than it sounds, Jordan," Mark admitted, looking down at the papers in front of him. "I mean, what if someone doesn't deserve respect? What if they're rude or they don't follow the rules? How do we handle that?" Jordan looked at Mark, his expression thoughtful. "It's not about whether they deserve it, Mark. It's about setting the example. You can't control how people behave, but you can control how you treat them. Respect is a choice, not a reaction." Mark nodded slowly, processing Jordan's words. "I think I'm starting to get it." Jordan smiled. "It takes time, but every day you'll get a little better. And soon, this whole hotel will be a place where people feel valued, not because of who they are or what they have, but because of the way they're treated." Meanwhile, Lily had grown into her role as the hotel's head receptionist, and her confidence had skyrocketed. She was no longer the nervous young woman who had greeted guests with uncertainty. She was a strong, respected leader, known for handling even the toughest situations with grace. One evening, as she was closing up the front desk for the night, a woman in a suit approached, her face familiar but distant. Lily glanced up, recognizing the woman immediately. It was Charlotte Benson, one of the hotel's highest-profile investors. She had been one of the earliest supporters of Jordan's vision, but lately, her visits had become less frequent. Charlotte's smile was tight as she approached Lily. I wanted to stop by and see how things were going here, she said. I've heard some good things about the hotel's recent changes. But I'll be honest with you, Lily. When Jordan first came to me with these ideas, I was skeptical. I didn't think it would work. Lily, not one to shy away from a challenge, stood up and looked Charlotte in the eye. I understand why you might have had doubts. Change is hard, but it's been working. Guests have noticed the difference, and so have the staff. We're not just about luxury. We're about something much more valuable, respect. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. Respect? Lily nodded. Yes, respect for every person who walks through these doors, no matter who they are. That's what makes the Starlight Grand Hotel different. It's about making people feel welcome. Not just the rich and powerful, but everyone. Charlotte studied Lily for a moment, clearly considering her words. I like what I'm hearing, she said finally, her tone softer. Maybe I underestimated Jordan. Maybe I underestimated this place. Later that night, as the hotel grew quiet, Jordan stood on the balcony of his office, looking out over the city lights below. He had come a long way since the days when he had first walked into the hotel, unnoticed and underestimated. Now, the Starlight Grand Hotel was something more than just a business. It was a symbol of change, of respect, and of the power of treating people well. But even with everything he had accomplished, Jordan knew that he couldn't stop now. He had proven his point to the staff, to the investors, and to the guests, but there was still work to be done. The real test was yet to come. Just then, Lily entered the office, holding a folder in her hands. "Mr. King," she said, her voice bright, "I have something for you." Jordan turned to face her, intrigued. "What's this?" "It's a proposal," Lily said, "for expanding the hotel's mission. It's from Charlotte Benson. She wants to help us grow the idea of respect, not just within the hotel, but into the community as well." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Lily smiled. "Charlotte's on board now. She believes in what we're doing here. She wants to partner with us on a new initiative, something that will allow us to give back. It's called Respect Beyond the Walls. It's about providing training for local businesses on how to treat their customers with dignity and respect, a way to extend what we've created here into the community." Jordan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this kind of support, especially not from someone like Charlotte, who had once been so skeptical. But now, it seemed like the movement was growing, reaching beyond the walls of the hotel. "Let's make it happen," he said, a determined smile spreading across his face. "This is just the beginning. We'll change the world, one person at a time." In the weeks that followed, the Starlight Grand Hotel became a beacon of hope in the community. The hotel's new mission, built on respect and dignity, was spreading beyond its walls. Local businesses started adopting the same philosophy, and guests who came to the hotel left feeling uplifted and valued. As for Jordan, Mark, and the rest of the staff, they knew that the journey was far from over, but they also knew that they had made a real difference, a difference that would last for years to come. The Starlight Grand Hotel was no longer just a place to stay. It was a place where people came not only to experience luxury, but also to experience respect, something that was often missing in a world where wealth and power too often ruled the day. And as Jordan King looked out over the city one last time, he realized something important. True luxury wasn't about the finest linens or the most expensive champagne. It was about creating an environment where people were valued, not for what they had, but for who they were. The hotel had become more than just a business. It had become a movement, and it was only just beginning.